You're tuning in because you want to get a real handle on things, right? Cut through the noise and understand what's fundamental.
Exactly.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into the very beginnings, really, of building a modern online platform.
We are. We're zeroing in on the core, giving you the essential insights into what makes these digital spaces tick. Our focus today is on what we're calling the initial foothold, a project named TomeStackLite.
TomeStackLite. Yeah, it has a nice ring to it. So the big picture here, the ultimate goal, is to create a fully working ebook marketplace. Imagine a digital shelf where authors can offer their books and readers, well, like you, can easily discover and buy them. They've even got a very early online presence, like a sneak peek. You can see the first steps at https://tomelite.web.app.
Right. It's live, albeit basic. And whether you're maybe thinking about building your own online venture, or maybe you're just fascinated by the tech that, shapes our digital world, this deep dive is specifically for you. Understanding these foundational elements and kind of the thinking behind the initial setup is incredibly valuable.
So our mission today seems pretty clear. To really understand the core idea and the initial technical foundation, that critical foothold that TomeStackLite has established using the Firebase platform.
That's the plan.
We've got some great background discussions, I understand, that outline the project's concept and the overall vision to guide us.
We do. They lay out the groundwork nicely.
Okay, let's really unpack this foothold concept then. What does that actually mean in this context?
Well, the idea of a foothold is really central here. It's not about launching, a massive complete product right out of the gate.
Right, not everything at once.
Exactly. As our sources clearly state, a foothold is a strong or favorable position from which further advances or progress may be made. So it's all about creating a solid, stable starting point.
Gotcha. So the first step wasn't about creating this huge marketplace with tons of features.
Not at all.
Instead, the priority was getting something lean, something that actually works, and this seems key, something that can be deployed automatically.
Precisely. Think of it like establishing a reliable base camp before you start climbing the actual mountain.
Okay, good analogy. And I gather this approach is a bit different from maybe previous ideas.
Yeah, what's particularly interesting is seeing how the project's approach has evolved. The original idea, which was just called TomeStack, it leaned on more traditional infrastructure.
Like what?
Using things like Docker containers, virtual machines, maybe hosted on platforms like DigitalOcean, that sort of thing.
Okay, the more classic setup.
Right. TomeStackLite marks a significant shift towards a different approach, using a platform as a service, or PaaS, specifically Firebase in this case.
And why that shift? What's the benefit?
Well, this architectural change offers some key advantages. Things like greater scalability, potentially, and definitely less need to manage the underlying server infrastructure yourself.
So less server admin headaches.
Exactly. It lets the team concentrate more on building the actual features of the marketplace, not managing servers.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, but why focus specifically on an ebook marketplace? Seems quite, specific.
It is a focused choice, yeah, but a very deliberate one. An ebook marketplace, even a simple one, touches on so many fundamental aspects of building a modern full-stack web application.
Like what kind of aspects?
Well, you need a dynamic front end, right, where users can browse and interact. You need logic running behind the scenes, the server-side stuff to handle things like searching or purchasing.
Right, the engine.
You have to manage data info about the books, the users, and of course you need a dependable way to get the application online and keep it updated with new features, that deployment piece.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a, static web page. There's a lot happening under the hood, even in a basic version.
Precisely. And by getting a handle on how all these different pieces fit together for something like an ebook marketplace, you gain skills that are really broadly applicable.
How so?
Well, whether you're aiming to build the next big social media platform, or maybe a project management tool, or even just your own e-commerce site, the foundational principles and the underlying tech, they often have a lot of overlap.
Right, the patterns repeat.
Exactly. Mastering these core elements with TomeStackLite can really be a launchpad for a huge range of web development projects.
Okay, so we understand the why the ebook example makes sense, and the shift to Firebase offers advantages. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is this foothold, like in a tangible sense? What did they actually build?
Okay. The TomeStackLite Basic Foothold codebase that represents the initial minimal yet completely functional and crucially automatically deployable version of the app.
The bare minimum that works.
Pretty much. Think of it as the absolute minimum needed to have something live and breathing online. And it's built using a modern and pretty efficient set of tools.
All right, give us the rundown then. What are the essential components?
Okay, so at its heart, it's a Next.js 15 application.
Next.js. Okay. Popular framework.
Very popular. For those maybe less familiar, it's a really powerful framework built on top of React, which itself is huge for creating interactive user interfaces.
And Next.js 15 specifically.
Yeah, and what's particularly notable here is that this version uses what's called the app router. It's a more recent way of structuring Next.js apps, makes building more sophisticated features more manageable as the project grows.
Okay.
And using Next.js is significant because it enables powerful features like server-side rendering.
Which helps with loading speed, SEO.
Both, exactly. Faster initial page loads, better SEO, really important for an online marketplace.
Got it. So the fundamental structure is Next.js. What about how it looks? The UI.
Right, the visual aspects. For that, they've implemented Tailwind CSS.
Heard of that. Utility-first CSS.
That's the one. It allows for really rapid styling by applying small, focused utility classes directly in the HTML. And then on top of that, they've integrated shadcn.
Shadcn. What's that?
It provides a collection of pre-built, reusable UI components, buttons, forms, dialogues, that kind of thing, which are already styled using Tailwind.
So like building blocks.
Exactly. This approach lets you quickly create a clean, functional UI without writing tons of custom CSS from scratch. It saves a lot of development time.
Efficiency is definitely key in those early stages. Okay, now getting this thing online, that always feels like a big hurdle. How did they tackle deployment?
Absolutely. And this is where the Foothold really shows its strength. It includes a fully automated deployment pipeline using GitHub Actions.
GitHub Actions, so
Yeah.
automation for deployment.
Yeah. If you're not familiar, GitHub Actions lets you define automated workflows that run when things happen in your Git repository, like when new code is pushed.
Right.
In this scenario, it's configured to automatically build the Next.js app and then deploy it directly to Firebase hosting.
Wow. Okay, that automation sounds critical. Reduces errors, speeds things up.
Both. Definitely speeds up the dev cycle and cuts down on the chance of manual mistakes during deployment.
So developers push code, and it just goes live, pretty much.
That's the core idea. And it leverages Firebase's framework-aware hosting. This is pretty clever.
Framework aware, what does that mean?
It means Firebase is smart enough to recognize it's hosting a Next.js application.
Okay.
And because of that, it automatically handles deploying and managing the necessary back-end components, things like Cloud Functions or Cloud Run that Next.js needs for features like server-side rendering.
So you get the dynamic app benefits without manually setting up all the back-end services yourself.
Exactly. Firebase handles it for you in this context.
And the proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah.
The Foothold is actually live at https://tomestacklight.eb.app.
It is. It's not just theoretical. It's a working starting point anyone can visit.
Which means they've gotten past those initial set of headaches.
For sure. They've successfully navigated the complexities of project setup, deployment config, getting it live. And this stable, automatically deployed foundation is so important because now
Now they can build on it.
Precisely. Now they can really focus on incrementally adding those more advanced features we mentioned, user authentication, databases, payments, maybe even those AI features planned down the line.
And that automated pipeline makes adding those features smoother.
Should make it significantly smoother and more efficient, yes. Deploying updates becomes routine rather than a major event.
Okay, this is making sense. We've got the what and the why. Now, let's dive a bit deeper into the how. The specific technologies making up this initial foothold.
Let's break down that core tech stack. So for both the front end, what the user sees, and also handling some server-side logic, they're using Next.js 15.
Right, built with React 18, you said.
React 18, yes, and using TypeScript.
TypeScript for static typing.
Yeah.
Helps catch errors.
Exactly. Adds that layer of safety, helps catch potential errors early, leads to more stable code.
Okay, solid modern base. And the look and feel.
That's Tailwind CSS for the styling framework, and then those pre-built components from shadcn layered on top for faster UI development.
Got it. And the cloud platform underneath it all.
That's Firebase, Google's platform as a service. It's pretty comprehensive.
And within Firebase, what services are key here?
The main one making the site accessible is Firebase hosting. That handles serving the static files, gives you a global CDN for speed.
CDN Content Delivery Network.
Yeah.
Faster loading worldwide.
Right, and it manages the SSL certificate automatically for secure connections. It really simplifies a lot of the traditional server setup stuff.
Yeah, the CDN and SSL alone are big wins.
They really are. And for the backend execution, running server-side code for dynamic parts of the app.
Like the server-side rendering in Next.js.
Exactly. For that, Firebase seamlessly manages either cloud functions or cloud run behind the scenes. It's part of that framework-aware integration. You don't have to directly mess with those backend services in this initial setup.
Okay. What about the deployment mechanics? You mentioned GitHub Actions, but what does Firebase use?
Good question. For the actual deployment workflow itself, when you trigger it, Firebase uses Google Cloud Build under the hood.
Cloud built.
Yeah, it takes the application code, builds it into a deployable version. The results, the built files, they call them artifacts, get stored in Artifact Registry.
So Cloud Build and Artifact Registry are working backstage.
Exactly. They're managed by Firebase when you deploy, either via their command line tools or through that GitHub Actions workflow. So you might not touch them directly in this foothold, but they're essential dependencies making the automated deployment work.
Makes sense. And we can't forget the developer tools, right? What are they using day to day?
Absolutely. For version control, managing the code, it's Git and GitHub. Standard stuff.
And GitHub Actions for the CI/CD.
Right. The continuous integration, continuous deployment, that's the engine automating the builds and deploys. And then the actual development environment they mentioned using is Windows 11 with WSL2.
WSL2 Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Yep, running a Debian distribution specifically, and using VS Code as the code editor.
So a Linux dev environment on Windows, that's pretty common now, isn't it?
Very common, yeah. It's an efficient setup for modern web development.
You also hinted at technologies planned for the full TomeStackLite application, beyond just this initial foothold. What's on the horizon there?
Yeah, that gives us an exciting glimpse of where it's all heading. The roadmap includes things like Firebase authentication.
For logins and user accounts.
Exactly, securely managing users. Then Firestore as the database.
Firestore.
Yeah.
That's a NoSQL database, right?
Correct, for storing all the application data details, user info, all that. Then Firebase storage for files.
Like the actual ebook files themselves?
Presumably, yes. Things like cover images, the book files, then Stripe for payments.
Standard for online payments.
Very standard and robust. And interestingly, they also mentioned GenKit.
GenKit sounds like AI.
It is. It's a toolkit, apparently, for building generative AI features directly into the application.
Interesting. So lots planned beyond this base.
Definitely. What we're looking at with this foothold is really just the foundational layer for a much bigger, more feature-rich platform down the road.
Okay, let's try and bring all of this together then. For someone listening to our deep dive today, what's the main takeaway? What should they really grasp from exploring this foothold?
I think the core takeaway should be an understanding of how this initial minimal but functional version of TomeStackLite was, well, first conceptualized, then built using this modern tech stack, and finally deployed to the web.
So understanding that whole process.
Yeah, you should hopefully have a much clearer picture now of that journey, starting from the local development setup using tools like WSL2 and VS Code, and ending up with a live, automatically updating application hosted on Firebase.
And it's probably worth remembering, it wasn't necessarily just push button easy from day one, right? There were likely hurdles.
Oh, absolutely. You have to assume the team had to navigate those initial complexities of just setting up the cloud environment.
Like what kind of things?
Well, things like enabling the right APIs in the Firebase console, figuring out the permissions.
Ah, the IAM stuff.
Yeah.
Identity and access management.
Exactly. Carefully configuring those IAM permissions to make sure all the different Firebase services can talk to each other securely, but without giving away too much access. Getting past those initial cloud setup hurdles is a really significant part of establishing that solid, reliable foothold.
Right. So seeing how TomeStackLite tackled this with a focused, automated approach on a modern pace like Firebase, it kind of demystifies the whole full-stack deployment thing a bit.
Hopefully. It doesn't have to seem like this massive, intimidating task.
Yeah.
It clearly shows how you can start small, define the scope well, establish that robust automated foundation, and then just incrementally build out more complex features on top of that stable base.
So for you, our listener, you should now have a much clearer understanding of those crucial first steps in building a modern online platform using serverless tech, and specifically using something like Firebase.
And that leads to a really interesting question for you to mull over, doesn't it? What new possibilities does this kind of modular, automated approach open up for your own projects or areas of interest? Could adopting this strategy, breaking down a big idea into a smaller, deployable foothold, be a valuable technique for you?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How might you approach your own ambitious ideas? Could you identify that minimum viable working version, that essential foothold, just to get started and build some momentum?
And what are the implications of using a platform as a service like Firebase? For rapid prototyping, maybe? Getting ideas out there faster.
Food for thought, definitely.
This deep dive into the foothold is, well, it's really just the beginning, isn't it? It provides a foundational understanding of the modern web development landscape today.
And how you can leverage these powerful tools.
Exactly. How you can leverage these tools and platforms to start bringing your own visions to life, maybe in a more manageable and efficient way than you thought.
Absolutely. A valuable reminder that even the biggest projects start with that first well-considered step. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.